So, the end of the last video, we where I showed you how to create a poster using a picture of a person, we ended off here where we have a basic plain background. Then we have our portrait that we added the cutout effect to, and we changed the colors. And then we added the text on top of that. So that's where we ended off in part one of the video. The second part of the video that I want to show you guys is how to add some style to your poster so it doesn't look so basic and plain. And we can do this using a couple basic shapes and changing our blending modes, which is here above our layers. And just creating a little bit more contrast and some depth and dimension to our poster. So what I have done, and I'm going to go ahead and make my layers visible, not only do I have the title Black History Month, but I added a box behind it, and I also took a quote from Angela Davis. I copied and pasted it and made it its own layer, and I set it on top of my background layer here. So you can see, here's the order of my layers. So I've got my background layer. On top of that is the text that I copied and pasted several times. On top of that is this box. Then we've got our photograph on top of these layers. I added a second rectangular box down here at the bottom, and within this box I added text that gives you a basic description of who the portrait of the person is. So now you can see, with doing a few extra steps with text and some basic shapes, we now have a poster that has a little bit more style to it, looks a lot more like a poster, and doesn't look so basic. So I'm going to show you guys how to do these steps. Pretty straightforward. And then you can apply these steps to your own poster that you're working on in class. So let me hide these layers again. Go back to our basic poster here. Alright. So what I did to add this text right here, I'm toggling this on and off so you can see it. I found a quote from Google, and I simply copied it and I pasted it into a text box. So I guess I'm just going to go ahead and jump over to Google Chrome, and I'm going to look up Angela Davis quotes, and I'm going to go here. The quote that I copied and pasted was this one right here. So I'm going to highlight that. And to copy, if you're using an HP computer, you can hit Control-C. That's going to copy. And then I'm going to jump back over to Photoshop. Alright. So, with my text tool, or my type tool, which is right here, I'm going to select that. And I'm going to come over and click and drag my mouse, and this is going to create a text box. So I'm going to click and drag and let go. And then within that box, I want to make sure that I am left aligning my text before I paste. So to paste, I'm going to hit Control-V. I'm just going to hit Control-V several times. I'm concerned about it cutting text off. That's not so much a concern of mine, because when I come over here and change my blending modes, it's going to fade into the background anyways. Alright, so you might want to notice that my text is 25 point. So if you go in and you start to paste your text and maybe it's set to 72 point, it's going to look a little out of proportion. So you don't want to have this really big fat text in the background because you want it to balance with the title that we have on the top. All right, so I'm going to go back to my move tool, and here you can see this layer right here that I just created. Now, the one that I did prior to this video, we're going to go have a look at that, and we're going to look up here at our blending modes, and you can see that I changed the blending mode of this text to screen. So we're just going to do that with this one. And the reason why it's not changing is because the text color that I created prior to making this video was actually a dark color. So when I changed it to screen, it gave me this look right here. But this time around, I copied my text in white. So that means I'm going to have to go look for a different blending mode that's going to give me the look that I'm going for. So you might have to play around with your blending modes to see, which one you like best. So far, I'm not really liking any of these. And I might not have any luck getting the effect that I want because I pasted my text in white. So actually I'm going to hide this layer and make this one visible because I created it the same way. The only difference is that this text that I copied and pasted, instead of in white, I copied it in a dark green color. And that way when I changed my blending mode, it gave me this effect. So I'm just going to go ahead and keep this layer. All right. So that's how you take text and paste it into the background and blend it in to the background layer to give it some movement and some contrast. All right, the next thing is my text box that I put behind my title. So as you can see, I made a new layer and I created a box in a dark green color. So to do that, we're going to go down here to our new layer icon. We're going to add a new layer. And if you want, you can rename the words and call it text box or title box or whatever you want to call it. That way you know what you've done on that particular layer. So once we create a new layer, I'm going to come down here. Actually, I'm going to go over here to my swatches. I'm going to pick a dark green. And then I'm going to go over here to my rectangular marquee tool. If you click and hold on this tool, you have a lot of other options. But because I want to create a square or close to a square shape, I'm going to use the rectangular marquee tool. And making sure I have my title box layer selected, I'm going to come over here and I'm going to click and drag my mouse and let go. And now I've created a selection, and inside that selection I'm going to paint it. So I'm going to go over to my paint bucket tool and I'm just going to click once inside that shape. And then to get rid of this marquee, or sometimes you'll hear a lot of people call it marching ants or a selection line, we're going to hit Control D if you're using a PC. Alright, so why does this box not look like this one? Well, if we look at this layer that I created prior to the video, you can see I changed the blending mode to lighten. So I'm going to go back over to the box I just created now, and I'm going to change the blending mode to lighten, and there we have the same effect. Alright, so looking in your layers window, you want to make sure your layers are in the same order as mine. You've got your background layer at the bottom. On top of that, is your text box with the quote that you pasted multiple times. On top of that layer is your title box. And then above that should be the picture that we did in part 1 of the video. So you should have that as a layer, like so. All right, on top of that layer, I'll make my box visible so you can see where it's at here. So again, I made a new layer and I created a box like this one. You'll notice that the blending mode I have is soft light. My opacity is 68. And I actually filled the box with black. So just keep that in mind. So let's go over here to our color swatches. And I want black to be in the foreground, so I'm just going to hit this double arrow here. I'm just going to switch black to the foreground. And then I'm going to come over, I'm going to add a new layer. And again, you can call this rectangle box or whatever you want. Alright, I'm going to go over with my rectangular marquee tool. And I'm going to hide this layer here. And then I'm going to create my rectangular shape. And same thing as with the title box, I'm going to go over with my paint bucket tool. I'm going to fill it with the color. And I'm going to hit Control D to get rid of the selection. And then I'm going to come up here to the blending modes and change it to soft light. And I'm just going to take my opacity down a little bit so that box is a little bit more see-through. Alright, so now we've got our box down here for balance at the bottom. The one thing I don't like about this box is I got a little bit more space here on the right than I do on the left, and I need to balance that out a little bit. So we're going to pull up our transform box and we're going to resize this box. To do that, you're going to hit Control T as in Tom on your keyboard. It's going to pull up your transform box, and then we're just going to pull out our little anchor boxes right here and just hit return. So now this looks a little bit more even to me than it did before. Alright, so now we've got our rectangular box put in place, and the last thing we need to do is drop in, and I did this in the color white. So if you come over here to your color swatches, you're going to click on the two tiny size boxes right here, or you can hit D on your keyboard and it will default your colors to black and white. And if you click on the double arrows to switch your colors, you want white to be in the foreground. Now another keyboard quick key you can use to do the same thing is X on your keyboard. So if you hit X, it'll switch your color swatches back and forth. So with this one, we want white to be in the foreground. And where I got this information was good old Wikipedia. So we'll just jump over there and type in Angela Davis. And I just copied this little section right here. So Control C to copy. And then again, I'm going to go over to my type tool and I'm going to click and drag a box. And in that box, I am going to hit Control V to paste. And right now you can't see it because the box I created is actually not on top of the document that I made. But if I go to my move tool and I click and drag my text up, then you'll be able to see what I just created. So I'm just going to I'm going to go back to my type tool. I'm going to take out her birth date right here. I don't really want all that extra text in there. I just want to keep it simple. And then I'm going to drop this text right over the top here. And the layer that I created before the video, my blending mode was Vivid Light and opacity 56. So we're just going to go up here and change that. Go to Vivid Light, opacity 56-ish. And I think that's pretty good. So those are just a couple simple things you can do with shapes and text to create some balance, to create some movement. So having all of this text in the background repeatedly is helping to move your eye through the design. It's also helping to balance out the large font of the title. It just makes it look a little bit more interesting and less plain, and more like a poster. So this is how you can style up your poster a little bit more. I challenge you guys to try to create this poster, maybe using a different picture of another influential person in Black history. It doesn't even necessarily have to be a person who's passed on. It could be somebody who's currently living. But this is one of the first projects we're going to do, is to create posters for Black History Month. It would be really cool if there are some really good examples, if we could print those off and put them around the school. So that's one of the first projects we're going to do before we really get into editing photos into Photoshop, because once we start doing that, things get a little bit more complicated. So again, try this with the poster you're working on. Once you've done that and you're comfortable, try to create a poster again with another figure or person with a different photo and see how it goes. So I look forward to seeing what you guys have done when I get back to class. At this point, it's looking like maybe a couple more days. But in the meantime, if you have questions, work with people next to you, feel free to send me a message through my Swift site, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. All right, good luck, guys.